So everyone knows that this meeting, first of all, is being recorded, and we do plan on putting it on YouTube. So just letting you know. Thank you all for joining the COTEversations about energy code and beyond by the AIA Westchester Hudson Valley, the COTE Committee. And I'm Medina Bania, and I chair the committee, and we're going to have some of the committee members attending as well. I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Latitude Compliance. I do actually work with them. They are a sustainability consulting firm, and they are born out of the demands of Local 97, and they specialize in guiding building owners, management companies, and designers achieve environmental compliance and energy efficiency. I am going to put their information in the chat if anyone wants to talk with them. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Michael Hernandez. I hope I'm saying that right. He's the director of New York policy for Rewiring America. And I'm going to pass this along to him and stop the share.
Hello, thank you so much for having me today. Really appreciate the opportunity to walk through New York State's development of its new energy code and some of the provisions that are included, some of the process that's happened, and what we can look forward to in the next couple of weeks and months. So let me share my screen. Give me one moment. Okay. So like I said, we're just going to kind of walk through what's happening with the development of the code, what's been included in some of the recent draft versions of the code and what we're expecting, and then the process that they'll be going through to finalize the code update. Okay, so here's kind of an agenda of what I'll walk through. So these are some of an overview of some of the provisions that have been included in the energy code to date. For electrification, we have All Electric Building Act, which requires newly constructed buildings in New York State to be all electric. That will take effect in December of this year. We have some limitations on supplementary heat for heat pumps. We have limitations on the use of electric resistance. And we also have requirements for demand response controls for water heating. In resilience, there's on-site renewable energy requirements. Flood hazard areas have been expanded. The climate zone 6 zones have been reclassified, and we will see sea level rise in tidal coastal areas modified. For efficiency, there's lighting efficiency requirements, thermal bridge mitigation, restrictive thermal envelope increases, and certification requirements. In equity, we'll see things like separate metering requirements for low-rise buildings. We'll also see fossil fuel limits, so no continuous pilot lights for gas, increased minimum efficiency for gas-fired water heaters. For energy storage, there's requirements for lithium batteries and energy storage system fire safety provisions. For electric vehicles, we see car charger safety, and for micro-mobility devices, we see some provisions there as well. I'll also kind of walk through some provisions that we don't see in this latest draft of the energy code, including EV readiness and interactivity, a ban of fossil fuel combustion systems for existing buildings, thermal network readiness, benchmarking, energy storage requirements, energy code inspector updates, and energy performance rating for sale when listing a building. So we'll walk through some of those. A little bit of an introduction. Michael Hernandez. I'm the New York Policy Director for Rewiring America. I'm an attorney. I've been admitted in both New York State and California. Worked for as the Energy Secretary, the Assistant Secretary, and the Speaker for the Speaker of the Assembly. Also worked at the Dormitory Authority, which is the public authority that builds New York State's infrastructure. So we would issue bonds, and we would use the revenues from those bonds to build New York State's infrastructure. I've been the New York Policy Director at Rewiring America for about over 2 years. I worked to pass the All-Electric Buildings Act in 2023 and have been following its implementation through the building code process. Rewiring America is really focused on demand side, like how can we help people to move forward with their electrification and energy efficiency upgrades? Can we give them incentives? Can we provide them with information? Can we streamline that process? Help them find contractors, help them determine the types of projects that they can do to move forward. Now, in 2019, New York State passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It set ambitious goals for greenhouse gas emission reductions, as well as upping our clean energy generation. As part of that, there was an inventory done that said, well, what are our sources of greenhouse gas emissions in New York State? DEC completed that inventory, and they found that 32% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the building sector. So it's how we heat our homes, how we heat our water that actually contributes the most to our greenhouse gas emissions in New York State. So then part of the once we also created a scoping plan from the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. We created a council called the Climate Action Council, which set out a guideline on like, okay, what are the steps we need to take to decarbonize our building sector and our economy to achieve these greenhouse gas reduction goals. We also passed in 2022 the Advanced Building Codes and Standards Act, which basically said, take the report, the scoping plan that was created by the Climate Action Council, and incorporate that into the building code and the energy code. So that was a law that was enacted. So then what we ended up hearing is from the Building Code Council, who's responsible for updating the building code. Generally, they do it about every 5 years in New York State. We are using the 2020 version of the building code, which is based on a model code that was created in approximately 2017. So we really needed to update our code and to reflect all the laws that have been enacted since 2020, as well as the new model for energy that has been released by the International Code Council, the model code. But what we were seeing is that the Building Code Council was actually not really including these laws in their update. So you can read a little bit about, or you can listen. Here's an interview. I'll put it in the chat where we kind of walk through, like, why are they not including all of these like energy efficiency and electrification requirements into the versions of the code that they're making public? And so for years, we were kind of pushing on that. Here you can see then Assemblywoman Fahey created a letter, a sign-on letter from different members of the Assembly, kind of saying to the Code Council, look, we passed these laws. We expect you to incorporate them into your update of the building code. Emily Gallagher is an assemblywoman. She was the lead sponsor for the All Electric Buildings Act, testified before the council saying, hey, why have you not incorporated the All Electric Building Act into the version of the building code? And then we finally did get a version last summer that incorporated the All Electric Buildings Act and the Advanced Building Codes and Standards Act, requiring energy efficiency and electrification in newly constructed buildings. But then we haven't seen a code since then. And Governor Hochul in December was reported by Buffalo News to say, maybe we're going to push back these timelines on the building code enforcement. And then soon thereafter, she actually paused the Cap and Invest program, which caps greenhouse gas emissions and then slowly ratchets those down while collecting revenue. And that revenue is being used for climate action, including building decarbonization work. The Building Code Council was originally scheduled to meet in December 6th to pass the draft of the building code, which included electrification and energy efficient updates. They rescheduled that meeting to January 16th. And then as that date approached, they rescheduled the meeting to next week on February 28th. So we've had over 60 days of delay on the actual revised draft. And so everybody's eager to kind of see what's the newest draft going to look like. Now, the process of the building code, it's a 17-member panel, has been not very encouraging. Members of the Building Code Council have said that they are opposed to electrification and energy efficiency. Here I'll share a quick blurb from one of the meetings where you had a building developer, Bill Tyne, a representative of building developers, testifying at a council meeting. He's not sure he wants to pass a building code or an energy code that's more energy efficient. So I'll play that. Can you hear it?
As a council member, what I struggle with
Yes.
is the fact that I'm supposed to vote on code changes to not just determine whether they're good for New York, but also to bring them into compliance with New York state law. And the legislature's already ruled on that. They've made this law. The deadline is looming. It's already been put in place. And I think the technical issues that I've been talking about have fallen on deaf ears. So what do I do in good conscience? Do I vote for something to make it compliant with a law that I know is going to create all kinds of headaches down the road? Or do I vote my conscience and say, I'm opposed to it. I don't care what the...
Okay, and so there you see council members saying, hey, I don't think I want to vote for an electrified energy efficiency energy code. Now, here's the chair of the council. His response is...
As a council member, what I struggle...
His response is, well, you get to vote. So you get to determine whether or not this becomes the next energy code or not, which is an unusual response for a legislatively created body that's being created to update the code to reflect the laws that are enacted by the legislature. So let me play this for you.
We've never faced that before, where a majority of the council disagree with the legislature. But when the legislature tells us this is the policy of the state, we and it needs to be the policy-making body, right, at that point. So, but you still have a vote. You're right. That's the answer.
So, I think there needs to be certainly public outcry, that to tell these members, you certainly should be complying with the law when you are voting on the next energy code update. And as I said, we're going to see the revised version of the code probably next week before next Friday's meeting. And I would
We've
encourage
never faced that
folks
before,
to
where a majority of the
come
council.
out to that meeting. And I'll provide some additional information on when and where that's happening as well. Here you can see, I think probably everyone on the call is probably familiar. These are the numerous books that make up the building code, including the mechanical code, the energy code, things like that. And then the Building Code Council is made up of 17 members. They're appointed by the governor. Generally, they are from different state agencies or authorities. Right now, we have 2 members that are from an agency, the Department of Labor and Housing. And then there's appointees from 6 local governments. And then there are 7 appointments that are made by the governor with confirmation of the Senate for architects, engineers, code enforcement officers. And so these are the current appointees to the council. And so you can see who they are and, what city. There are some vacancies. Right now, there's a vacancy in the county and the town and the village. And so they ideally, that's the makeup right now. Now, like I said, code happens approximately every 5 years in New York State. It's generally based on the model code that's produced every 3 years. So that's where we right now we're using the 2020 code. It was initially thought that we were going to be able to kind of get a code draft by September of 23. And then get the final code enacted by September of or December of 24. We have not, we are way off that schedule. You can kind of see here, we did get a notice of rule and development around July of 2024. And then we were supposed to meet again in December to get the approval of the draft and then start the notice of proposed rulemaking. None of that has happened. So we keep getting pushed back, and we're getting closer and closer to the time of the enforcement for the All Electric Buildings Act. So this was the notice of rule and development that we saw come out in July. They asked for comments on those codes. They were accepted until the end of September. We heard from the staff of the Department of State's Division of Building Codes and Standards that they received over 15,000 comments on those draft codes. And as you're probably aware, the code regulates minimum energy conservation requirements for new buildings. So that's what we're kind of talking about. When you're building a new building, how energy efficient, at a minimum, do they need to be? You can always go more, but you can't go less. And then this really deals with, and I'll just note for existing buildings, generally they are using whatever code year that they were used when they were built, when they're doing maintenance. But sometimes they can be required to apply the latest standards if they're doing some additions or substantial renovations to an existing building. The commercial provisions of the energy code generally apply to buildings that are larger, residential buildings that are larger than 3 stories. That's considered a commercial code. And anything smaller than 3 stories is considered a residential, for residential buildings. Now, I'll just walk through some of the electrification provisions. Here you can kind of see that the All Electric Buildings Act basically says that for starting in December of this year, there's a ban on fossil fuel combustion systems for all buildings less than 7 stories and for commercial spaces less than 100,000 square feet. and industrial spaces as well. And then starting in December of 2028, all buildings will have a ban on fossil fuel combustion systems. There is an exemption within the structure that says if you go to the utility and you can get confirmation from the utility that actually a new electrified building is the electric grid cannot handle a fully electrified building, then you can get a waiver from that requirement. So this won't shut down the grid if there isn't capacity for a fully electrified building. Then then I'll just talk about there's a provision that talks about heat pump supplementary heat. If you have a supplementary system for your heat pump, so a backup system, whatever that backup system is, if it's fossil fuels, if it's electric resistance, you have to have controls in that heat pump that only allow that supplementary system to kick on when the heat pump cannot handle the load on its own. So that's part of they don't want people using the supplementary system as the primary system. So that's part of the update to the code. Then we have here new limits on the use of electric resistance space heating. Electric resistance is not energy efficient. It's very expensive. And so even though we're moving away from fossil fuel combustion, we don't want building owners to be building buildings now with electric resistance. We want them to adopt clean energy, energy efficient heat pumps. And then there's a requirement for water heating that there be a demand response in water heating. So this way, the grid and your water heater can communicate and determine when's the best time to heat your water. Should you do it at nighttime when it's off peak? Do you do it, in the middle of the day, at the top of the peak that you'll be able to control? And so that's demand response controls. These are the definitions for demand response controls. And then there's resiliency provisions. This is basically saying a new requirement that for all new buildings that are commercial, they will have some on-site renewable energy available to them. So that's a good provision. And here's the definition of renewable energy resources. It can be solar, wind, waves, tides, landfill gas, biogas, or extracted through through the earth. So those are the various renewable energy sources. And then there's new requirements for documentation related to your renewable energy certificates in the building. Where's that renewable energy coming from? And then interestingly enough, based on climate data and consistently higher temperatures in New York State, there are about 8 counties that were characterized as cold climate zone 6. Now they will be recategorized as climate zone 5 because their annual temperatures are much higher than a climate zone 6. And so those will be recharacterized. For those buildings that are still in climate zone 6, for their commercial buildings for residential buildings in climate zone 6 and for all commercial buildings, you would install energy recovery ventilation or heat recovery ventilation systems. So you're not losing the heat that's being produced through your systems. You're capturing that heat and using it within your building system. And then there's also an expanded flood hazard area to include a 500-year gas floodplain. There's a language for sea rise for tidal coastal areas, 16 inches based on recommendations from DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and required by New York State legislation. And then efficiency standards. We have lighting equipment. Now they're saying that that there should be at least 45 lumens per watt, and then also lamps capable of operation of 65 lumens per watt or greater. So really upping the lighting efficiency standard. And then requiring for certain spaces within the building that they have either automatic turn off when there's nobody in the room, or a dimmer switch to allow for the lights to be dimmed down. Also, there's allowances for external lighting systems. So, limiting the amount of energy being used to illuminate the external area of the building. And then higher thresholds for thermal bridges being the areas where heat escapes from your building. So they want to make those thresholds higher, so that heat escapes from and cooling escapes from the building. And then just some updates to what information is included in your building certificate, requiring more renewable energy, and then more restrictive building thermal envelope requirements. And so stepping up the amount of insulation that you would have in your walls, in your attics, and in your basement to really provide some energy efficiency in those homes. So here are the both the R values and the U values to upgraded. And then energy storage, there's lithium battery storage collection requirements, fire code recommendations. There was a working group related to energy storage systems, and they included those provisions in there. And then equity, basically saying that you should have separate meters for each unit in your building, so that every unit can do smart metering, can control their consumption. They're aware of what their consumption is and take actions to modify it. And then for electric vehicles, provisions were added for fire safety provisions regarding car chargers and including emergency shut-off breakers, building code, provisions related to powering micro mobility devices, including charging and storage areas. These are like, e-bikes, e-scooters, things of that nature. And then limits on fossil fuel systems. So you can't have a continuously burning gas pilot light in your appliances. There should be on-demand pilots or intermittent ignition pilot lights. And then restrictions on gas fireplaces, again, related to continuous pilot lights, and with updated efficiency standards for those gas fireplaces. And then finally, updating appliance code standards to meet the federal required, because we are preempted by the federal government. And then the scoping plan. The scoping plan basically set out all these provisions. They said, Building Code Council, you should include all of these things in your updated version of the building code and the energy code. Here are some things that were in the scoping plan that were not included in the draft. So the scoping plan said that we should be prohibiting the replacement of fossil fuel equipment at the end of its life for existing buildings. So if you have an existing building, at the end of the life of your gas boiler, you would replace that with a heat pump or other source of clean energy or clean heating. And then the scoping plan also said required the sale and installation of energy efficient or zero emission new equipment for space heating and hot water at the end of its life. require electric vehicle battery interactive capacities. This is for resiliency. So if you have an electric vehicle, you can plug it in and you can use your vehicle's battery to power your home. And so the scoping plan said, you know, if we want to have a resilient system, we should be able to use the vehicle's battery for those times where the grid is down or there's a problem, you know, and so that was a recommendation. They also said that where you're providing parking for a new building, that you should have electric vehicle readiness for that spot. So you should have all the things in place where if somebody wants to electrify or purchase an electric vehicle, that those systems are already in place in the building. Then there was required readiness for future connection to thermal energy networks, provide energy benchmarking and disclosure for larger buildings. So we know how much greenhouse gas emissions are they, what's their energy consumption and output. So those things were recommended. Require large existing properties to upgrade to energy efficient lighting. And then also require energy storage for new construction that operates independent of the grid. So energy storage systems that don't require the grid to be connected in order for them to operate. And then 3 more, require on-site renewable generation that is able to operate independent of the grid. Again, so that's another resiliency provision. And then credentialing program for energy code inspectors, require prior year energy consumption disclosure at the time of sale or lease. And then finally, require energy performance rating as part of a sale for when you're listing that building for sale. All right, so thank you very much for listening for that walkthrough, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Michael. Now I kind of invite everyone to, maybe you want to show your face for a second, because this is going to be part of the discussion. We're all kind of talking together and we're learning from each other. This is intended to be a knowledge sharing environment. The idea is that if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, or we're going to just open this up to whoever mentioned a question. I know I also got some personal questions, so I'm going to put them through. So Katie, I'm going to invite you to unmute first.
Okay. That was amazingly informative and terrific, but the elephant in the room is the change in total sea change in attitude we're seeing from Washington. Do you have any speculation? Is it too early to see what effect that might have on New York?
I think the biggest change, you know, will be for any kind of, I think one of the things that people are looking at is the Inflation Reduction Act, which provided, you know, revenue sources for homeowners who are wanting to electrify or make their premises more energy efficient. There were, you know, New York, I think, was allocated approximately $317 million for rebates. I think in 2023, the first year that tax credits were available for New Yorkers, there was over $300 million in tax credits that were used by New Yorkers. So I think there, you know, clearly the president has issued executive orders pausing those funding sources. There's been a court order telling agencies that they cannot pause those funding sources, and there's pending litigation on that. And it seems though there might be some slowdowns on some of those, but as of now, the court has basically ordered the federal government to keep providing those incentives. So I think we're still waiting to see, you know, but as of right now, those were obligated sources of revenue. that are still exist and are moving forward.
Thank you.
I had a question in regards to one of the comments that it said was prohibiting like the replacement of fossil fuel equipment like at the end of its life. That seemed like a pretty standard normal thing to do. And I know in my own practice that's something we always recommend buildings, existing buildings, to it just seems like a weird thing to take off going through the list of what was taken off. So do you have any insight of why those things are missing for the updated one? Or like was there comments that were distributed of why certain things were removed? Or we just don't know. It's like those hidden meetings that you had before where some people just didn't like it, so they took it out. Like, how does it work?
Yeah, unfortunately, there has not been robust conversation amongst the council members as to, what is in the scoping plan, and what's been basically provided to the council within law as you should update the building code to reflect these provisions. We haven't heard anything from the council members as to what their thoughts are and why they included some things but didn't include other things. And so it's not really clear. I can tell you that, this is a stakeholder process. And so everybody engaged in constructing buildings is, kind of putting forth their, agenda. And so you have, environmentalists who are sort of saying like, well, we need to make buildings more energy efficient. It will make them more affordable and it will be, operationally. But then you have building developers who are saying, oh, but it's going to cost us more to build the buildings if we have to put in all that insulation. And, so we don't want to do that. And then you have obviously fossil fuel industry who they profit off of selling, fossil fuels to heat homes. And so they are also engaging in the process. And so where the state kind of like draws the line to accommodate like between all of these different stakeholders, I think that's what staff is trying to do. And that's why it's so important to come to those meetings, express your point of view. And I think particularly for architects, who are, licensed, educated, and professionals. So it's not just, some environmentalists who are necessarily saying this, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but I think it's also like professionals who have education who are saying, no, this is the right direction. And so I think that that's really needed. And I did put,
And that's at that meeting, right? That will
that's
come,
right.
that one next week Friday. So they're really looking for a technical, and I think Michael, you shared who is a part of that council. So you really see that they're really lacking this technical experience where we can really be a part of this conversation. So please sign up, join it. And is it a public comment? Like you can comment on that
Abs
meeting? So that's
yes,
something that
absolutely.
you can definitely be a part of.
So
Jen, do you want to unmute and
So I just want to just point out in the thread, in the chat, I put in the notice of the meeting. You can go in person, which is in New York City, Albany, and Buffalo, where you can talk in person, or you can attend remotely via WebEx. And during the public comment period, you will be given 3 minutes to express your support for the strong energy efficiency provisions and concern for what's been left out.
thank you. Jen, go ahead.
Thank you, Adina. There are clearly some very major obstacles that have to be overcome, and thank you for beginning to bring those to light. This is more of a meat and potatoes question. Will ResCheck and ComCheck be updated concurrent with the new code?
I don't have an answer to that question. I can look and circle back with you.
Okay, they're great tools.
I know our data team here at Rewiring America utilizes those tools for our reports.
Thank you.
Tapani, this is a really great question.
I think you're on mute. Oh,
Okay. Yeah, I've been studying this with the other people, and the bottom line is that we have the Greenland and South Pole. They're working a little faster than expected, and the numbers are frightening. And so, in one generation, we might have quite a change. And we have in nowhere, no town in the United States or anywhere have even tried to address these. And it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of lenses that where we can talk about why energy efficient homes are so important. Certainly the greenhouse gas reduction goals are, you know, in my mind should be of paramount importance. But I'll also just mention energy affordability. Like there's a crisis in New York right now where people just can't afford to pay their energy bills. Like about half of the population, half of the households are low to moderate income households, and they're just really struggling to make to be able to pay their energy costs, which keep on going up, partially because in New York, we charge the ratepayers or the gas customers for the cost of maintaining the gas infrastructure. So that's very costly, and it's much more costly than actually the gas supply. It's by 3 or 4 times more costly. And so I think that's an important provision too. If we electrify the homes and we make them more energy efficient, that will certainly bring down energy costs for those households as well.
And it's not that difficult.
No. And I think this is why it's so critical for, architects and engineers and us technical, experts being a part of these decisions, really being in the room of when we're talking about sea level rise and stuff like this. Like we're tracking this, we're seeing, that it is going, exponentially, and it's something to think about as we plan, to help guide the code according to what we're seeing and what our expertise is. Katie, please.
One thing you can't underestimate that's holding back change is people's fear of change and a comfortable with what they have. And I'm speaking quite directly of the homeowners that I know, and who understand if you burn things, you'll get warm, but they still don't quite get the picture of how electrification works, which is why our work as professionals is so important, and why the code is so important, because it doesn't give them, which is why they don't like it, doesn't give them an option. It pushes them in the direction of change. So that's something we have to work to overcome, and I think that's part of what your group is probably doing, Michael, trying to help people be more comfortable with this gigantic change from what they're used to. Good work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. I think and I think as architects, you are probably more aware of this than most of the people I talk to. But we're talking about people's homes, right? Like this is where they live. It's a very intimate conversation. And so how they heat their homes, I think, and so they need trusted professionals, who can kind of like say like, okay, like they designed this home, like they designed this building, and if they say like that this can happen, and that it should happen, I think that's an important part. I think one thing that Rewiring America is confident in is that this is just a better model, like it's so like ultimately we'll get to a place where people will just want to have it because it's just a more efficient, more cost-effective system that doesn't have the health impact costs, you know, of combusting fossil fuels in your residence. And it doesn't have the costs associated with climate crisis. So it just, you know, it eliminates those costs, and then it also provides benefits.
And I'm just gonna add here, because this is a conversation, I think obviously that happened within that council, that the video that you shared, how people are saying, you know, I don't even know how I feel about climate change, or we try to pass this many times and it's not working. So why are we still working on it, you know? And I don't know, Sarah, if you wanna unmute, because she put a really good question here. Not really a question, more like a comment about the issue that we're kind of, hey, Sarah.
Hey. Yeah, I mean, I guess, and I think Rewiring America has done a great job of this, of trying to understand what the dissenting opinion is and addressing it directly. I think, you know, just it might make your blood boil, but if you watch Jordan Peterson's interviews of climate scientists who kind of take the very small minority opinion that climate models are, oh, I don't even know, just if you're in for some entertainment. But, you know, Jordan Peterson's very smart. I don't know if anybody knows of him, but he's, you know, kind of got the conservative religious side, and he's, you know, putting this information about, you know, doubt in how serious climate change is in that world. And he's incredibly smart, and comes across very well. So I think he's been a growing voice in that. It's an issue that yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that what's nice is that when people are, you know, when their homes are made more energy efficient, you know, and they can see their energy costs going down, I think when they, you know, have a smart technology where they can like determine when they're heating their or cooling their system, their homes, based on like grid demand, you can just, it's just a better system, you know, there's no arguing that, I think. And so that's just a very real. And then what's really nice too is like when you install a heat pump in a home, you not only are providing that home with heating, but you're also providing them with cooling with the same units, right? And so a lot of homes have heating, but they don't have cooling. And so I think there's a lot of, I think the technology speaks for itself for those homeowners. You know, sometimes climate science can be something that might be hard for the everyday person to like wrap their hands around. But, you know, I think how their home feels and what their energy bills say, and is something that's a lot more accessible to them.
100%. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know, Sarah, if you have any more things on this topic, because I actually feel like this is something you and I just had this discussion in another meeting, but how the word, you know, climate and stuff like this, sustainability, sometimes it makes people think that they can have an opinion or like assess if climate change is real or not, while like the data and the facts are so past that. Like if someone who studies science, they understand that a percentage, like saying like, you know, that the probability of certain things, like as a scientist, that's how science works. You know, that there is never 100% accuracy with these types of things, because it goes through a series of theories. And if you're not a scientist, you don't understand, and you hear the word theory and you're like, oh, it's still being debated. And and then all of a sudden you think it's a conversation that you're a part of, when it's just that, you know, data that's accumulated through you know, a lot of things being proven and proven and proven. Like we're not talking about plate tectonics anymore, but still that's considered the same thing as you know, climate change. But you know, that's the thing, when you take a concept of experts discussing things, and then you bring it to the public and you bring in a moment of doubt, that doubt is stronger than anything else, because now people think they're a part of that. They think now they have to evaluate the data, and that's not really they're not a scientist. And I think that's really what it comes down to. That's why it's so important to highlight what Michael was saying, like the actual, you make your building more efficient. You see it. You see the results in real time. And Kiko, I don't know if you want to speak on this as well about.
Yeah, I like to say that I think we need to emphasize not the cost and the energy efficiency, but the health of everybody who lives in the building, whether it's residential or office or institutional. Doesn't matter what type, it's every building that we actually live in needs to be the healthy environment. I think passive house standard type of building does accommodate the wellness and health, whereas the existing way of how we heat our house, I mean, we do have many issues. We know our children having more asthma or having some, health issues that's as we get older ourselves. I do believe there is correlation, and I believe there is a science studied on the health and how our existed building code sort of enhanced that unhealthy way of living, and we didn't even know about it because that to us is so normal. But I think that's where we need to bridge that gap, because a lot of people don't care about wasting their money somehow. Unfortunately, many clients, I think we have, because they don't want to spend money to make more house efficient. However, they don't mind wasting money to heat and cool the house forever. So instead of those emphasis, I think health and wellness, our sort of humanity's survival, is more important and in long term for many generations in health of Earth itself. Thank you.
Stefani, I see you're, go for it.
Well, when I did the studies, I realized that the Central Park will be a beach. And in London, the House of Parliament, top bridge will be the level of sea in the future. I mean, how do we, I mean, it is, I mean, where does all that history go? It's where all those properties go. It's just unreal.
If I could just share a little bit of data on the health impacts of building decarbonization, just really quickly. This is from the scoping plan that was created in New York. Can you see?
Yes.
Yeah. So the vast majority of health costs, averted health costs, come from building decarbonization. Almost 30% come from eliminating wood burning as your primary heat source. And then another 30% comes from eliminating fossil fuel burning for your heat source. So those are significant improvements. And you can see on the right, the chart, the gray is just the building decarbonization. And this next slide, this next slide kind of talks about how much you save and what are the, you talked about asthma related incidents. You talked about thermal stress, people, dying because they freeze to death or they get heat stroke, trip and fall injuries, all of those things, carbon monoxide poisoning, all of those. When we avoid all of those things, there's a significant amount of improvement to our health and avoided societal costs for those as well. And I'll just quickly say, that generally this is not equitably, a lot of times like gas appliance pollution really impacts like the low income and disadvantaged communities a lot more because they have smaller unit sizes, more residents per home, inadequate ventilation, improper use of their stove. Sometimes they're just opening up their stove and just using that to heat their home. So you can imagine the health impact of that on the residents. And so even installing a heat pump pays back to the homeowner in averted health costs alone over the lifespan of that heat pump. Forgetting about the cost of, like, how much energy savings you have. So I just wanted to make that point as well. And to support what you said.
I think we have time for one last question. If anyone has any comments, question that you might have.
I have something to add to this. Just listening to what everybody is saying is we're basically the choir. And Michael, thank you for bringing this new song to the choir, the latest hit. But we share a knowledge base that very few people in the country have, maybe a little bit more in the Northeast, but for the most part, we have a population, a political bloc that does not understand or is not willing to understand where we're at. I equate it to driving a car by grasping the rear view mirror instead of the steering wheel and putting the car in reverse. And we're not going to get very far before we end up in a surprise collision. And Tapani has talked about that just more than we want to imagine. How do we, as an organization, or how do we as individuals reach the larger population? How do we get them to even converse with us at this point? I think that's really a bigger question, because everything else would fall into place if others understood where we're really at.
Well, I think I want to mention one thing. Time is just running out, and then I'll just respond to your question. One thing is, I know you guys are like centralized in like the Hudson Valley and Westchester, and I just wanted to point out that a lot of the members of the Building Code Council are from that area. You have Joe DeStefano, who's the mayor of, like, I think Middletown over there. The mayor of Yonkers is on the Building Code Council. Robert Hayes is like a building code inspector from that area. So you have a significant amount of influence over members just in your local area who are going to vote next week on this. So, but then I think, to answer your question, John, I think, we in collaboration with a lot of advocacy groups are working to, like, get the word out, be part of that marketing, get the information to the general public, as well as like NYSERDA. So I would love to collaborate with AIA on those events and activities that we're doing as well.
Yes, definitely. And so I want to just thank you so much, Michael, for being on this and sharing this knowledge about the updates on the energy code, and particularly for that meeting that's happening next week. Please see the link, attend, speak. Now you know what's going on, and exactly what Sarah wrote there in the chat as well. Like, if people really knew what we were envisioning, they would want it too. We're envisioning a world that's thriving and good. So, and these are the conversations that we want to start being a part of. It's like the one happening next week, getting technical advice, technical expertise in these conversations. And so we're not, quote unquote, just preaching to the choir. So again, I want to say thank you so much, Michael. If you want to put your link in your email in the chat, because I remember you said that you did feel comfortable. If anyone had any questions, you can reach out directly to Michael. I also want to say thank you again to our sponsor, Latitude. Again, I put their information in the chat. And if you are interested in joining the COTE Committee, please email Valerie Brown, and she'll put you in connect with us. And besides for that, thank you so much for joining, and I really appreciate you all for joining this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Adina.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Michael.
thank you, Adina. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you so
Michael.
much.
So you saw the latest quote, right, for your windows? Mike sent Thursday, February 20th.